I'm going to be writing something about this subject, and I don't want to imagine. I want to respect what real people are going through and not sugarcoat anything or guess. I would assume for many of you it seemed normal at first, but then slowly you started to realize that it's wrong, that you are not being treated like an equal human being. Could you describe what you felt throughout the relationship? How did you escape it? We're talking both mental and physical abuse. Edit. I see we're going to get a lot of replies here. I will make sure to read every story you have. Thank you to everyone who posted so far. While I was expecting many things, some of your responses surprised me and are definitely helpful. Also, to anyone struggling with this right now, don't let your abuser control you. I know there may be a lot of manipulations going on, but there are people who will help you. Please find them. Well, I'm at that point where it's impossible to answer everyone. I'd rather read your story and take a lot of notes than produce one-liner responses. I'm a good listener, always struggled with talking. Thank you, everyone. I'm happy this issue might reach others, and eventually abused men won't be seen as weak and pathetic. Story 1. My ex was, I believe, a sociopath. She was also a social worker and knew every law, bylaw, statute, and whatnot in the book. I remember waking up early one morning, looking at her sleeping, and wondering who this woman was in our bed because it sure as hell was not the woman I married, and that had only been 6 months before. It was literally a day-to-night difference. She was insane. She would always accuse me of cheating on her no matter what I did or where I went. If I so much as wore a decent shirt, she knew I was up to something. She would often steal my work tools, personal objects, and hide them, and then tell me that I was losing my mind when I asked her where my stuff was. She would rearrange pictures and furniture, and then when I asked her why she moved things, she would tell me she did it months ago, and I must be going crazy to just notice now. What really killed me was that we would meet people and I would be my usual joking and funny self, and after the party or dinner or whatever it was, she would tell me someone asked why I was telling such inappropriate jokes and maybe it would be best if I just shut up and said nothing when we went out. I found out later she would tell people I was seeing a psychiatrist and then have no idea why people's attitudes would change towards me so suddenly. She told me it was because I was so rude, weird jokes, bad behavior. She was a master of the mind games. And no, I was not seeing a psychiatrist. It took a toll on me mentally, as she was a very caring and wonderful person before we got married. And you really don't think anyone could be that evil. I have more stories than I can ever tell, to be honest. It came to the point where I went out for a drink by myself on my birthday, as she forgot it was my birthday, and when I got home, she started smashing me in the face with a closed fist. I was at least a foot taller than her, and I knew that I had best not fight back as 911 would be called, and who were they going to think was the aggressor? I came across her stash of things stolen from me, and I knew it was all pure mind games, and I packed and left one day when she was out of town. That did not stop her from trying to break into my new place, steal my truck, and charge me with all kinds of false charges. I left for another country, and times sure have improved. It was a long time ago. Life is way better now. Story 2. It took me roughly 5 years after she dumped me to recognize how wrong it all was. I see her current boyfriend from time to time, and I know exactly how he feels, but I didn't believe the guy before me, and I know the guy after me won't believe me either. I'd rather not write a handbook of abuse, but a good sign is if they're never wrong. No one is ever wrong. Story 3. When my ex, not ex then, was begging me to hit her so that she could call the police on me, I told her no, so she started hitting herself. My life was hell on earth. Story 4. She blamed everything on mental health. I wasn't allowed to look at another woman, play a game with a woman in it, or watch television or films with women in them. For a long time, I paid for YouTube Premium so I wouldn't see any ads with women in them and only watch things with predominantly males. She got pregnant 3 months into our relationship. If she thought I was looking at another woman, she would turn physical. Once I'd had enough, I would push her off me, and she would get some bruises on her legs. She took pictures and told everyone I physically and mentally abused her. I wasn't allowed to go out with my friends. My normal routine of showering in the morning before work was ridiculed because apparently I was only doing it to go flirt with the women at work. Long story short, when I had had enough was when I saw her offering pictures of her breasts to weed dealers because she couldn't afford to buy any. She was the most paranoid person I've ever met, and she said weed was her medicine. We have 2 kids together. I packed up my things one day while her grandma was sitting there, and she blackmailed me, saying she would go to the police about the bruises and accuse me of rape. She also said I'll never get to see the kids again. I'm currently going through family court to get sole custody of them because she went out on a night out a few months ago and left the kids in the house alone. Story 5. My ex was a manipulator and liar who could justify anything. I was afraid of leaving her because I thought she would dump her problems onto the kids. I lived for 20 years in an almost constant state of unhappiness. Now 4 years after divorcing, I am broke. I lost my business and now work for someone else. But I learned this: money is not everything. I am mostly happy now. My relationship with my kids is better than ever. The ex could not help herself from manipulating the kids. They figured her out and now understand me better. So go forward. Live your own life. It is probably the only one that you are going to get. Story 6. I discovered it when I made a Reddit post from a hotel room after an argument. Life was confusing, with so many happy times but always the fear that she could turn into a nightmare on a whim if things were not going her way. Thankfully, it wasn't physically abusive like many others, but it seemed like she knew how to keep it just below the threshold that would cause me to leave. I also enabled her by not putting a stop to her behavior sooner. Story 7. I'm on mobile, so apologies for formatting, etc. I've recently gotten out of a long-term abusive relationship. It was a lot of emotional and mental abuse, and it took me a long time to realize that what she was doing was abuse. It didn't matter what it was, but everything bad or inconvenient that happened was always my fault. Whenever I did something wrong, I had to apologize to her in a very particular way and get the apology right the first time, or it didn't count. Step 1. Say I was sorry. Step 2. Say what I did wrong. Step 3. Say what I should have done. Step 4. Prove to her I'll never do it again. Step 5. Give her a hug. Step 6. Make it up to her by doing something for her or taking her out somewhere. I had to do that every time I did, or she thought I did, anything wrong, no matter how small. I was also her full-time carer as well as her partner, and I was fine with that. I enjoyed being a carer, but she pushed me to my absolute limit. We lived somewhere that had a lot of hills and, being as polite as possible, she wasn't the smallest of people. I took her out in the wheelchair, and I didn't have a problem with that either. I'm not the fittest person in the world, but I'm reasonably fit, and taking her out in the wheelchair every day, all day, was physically exhausting and pushed me way past my limit, and she knew it. She didn't care how exhausted I was. She never gave a hoot. If I said I couldn't do it, it was me doing something wrong, and I had to do the whole apology ritual. This isn't everything she did to me. These are just a couple of examples of the things she put me through. I've tried to forget the kind of things she's done. It took me ages to figure out that how she was treating me was wrong, until one day I grew a spine and stood up for myself. We had a massive argument, and it turned into a fist fight. I wasn't punching her or anything, just defending myself. I realize how it sounds. I eventually climbed out the window and ran off. I later told her it wasn't right that things were the way they were and broke things off. I found out a couple of days later that she killed herself. It messed me up big time, and I'm still trying to recover from it. I realized that this might just be a day in the life of a carer, but the whole ordeal messed me up. If this is just normal behavior, please just tell me, because I doubt myself sometimes when I say it was abusive. Could be just normal care work, but it felt more abusive than anything. I hope this helps. Story 8. The moment we discussed her adultery and affairs while I was deployed, she destroyed my career by telling my command I raped her while kidnapping the kids to another country. I had to abandon my kids in Brazil because she would file 3 or 4 times in non-civilian courts and I would fight her for visitation. Her excuse was that I was suicidally depressed, but what else do you expect when it costs over $100,000 to lose your job? I'm fully medically retired and okay. Haven't seen the kids in 4 years. I write them stories daily to deal with my depression. I retired out after 8 deployments and 14 years of service. She got nothing because of where she filed. I wrote my home into my will to my kids. The rental income is theirs once it's paid off. Story 9. She broke one of my bones a second time. I hated her after that and couldn't forgive her, mainly because she really didn't care. She was also a pathological liar and manipulated me with some false rape allegations against the guy she immediately started a relationship with. Good times. Story 10. Oh man, so I was with a girl for 5 years. 3 of them I felt like a hostage in our own home. She was manipulative in all the right ways to rope me in. She would tell me nice things and compliment me, which no one ever did aside from my parents or siblings. Then backhanded compliments would come with repair. Then came the if this, then that demands and commands. She pretty much molded me for years well enough that she was able to cheat on me and convince me it was okay. I believed it. We started in college, and the idea that we had found soulmates was breathtaking to us, or to me as it feels in hindsight. She took advantage of this, used me for money and clothes, and then would yell at me and threaten to cause a scene if I didn't comply. I love you turned into casual words exchanged and more of a formality and confirmation that I was still under her spell or her control. Eventually, it went on long enough that someone like myself, I have mental health issues and have had trauma to make me feel some kind of way, thought staying in a place where I was being abused, mistreated, misused, and mishandled, turned into less than human, was better than starting over. Then whatever uptick in positivity from her, be it a compliment or anything that you can deem as positive attention towards me, was a lifeline, an oasis in a desolate place. The world scares me, always has, always will. She made me feel safe with her, like I needed her, like without her, I wouldn't be okay, and existing would be harder or impossible without her. She became a crutch, then a need, and then I was dependent. She made me dependent on her, and I allowed it. Eventually, after 2 years of the chase and almost 6 years of dating, talks of marriage, 2 apartments, and many more things, I came to terms with where I was. It made me sick. It still does. Better part of 10 years gone. I owe my brother and sisters a lot, but them sitting me down and explaining to me how bad things were is what did it. I also had some close friends that got through to me. I'm engaged to one of them now. Eventually, I mustered up the courage to quit her. She begged and pleaded with me and tried all of her old tricks. But I stood strong somehow, and my family and friends helped me move all of my things out to my sister's place, and then I found an apartment. She still reaches out from time to time, and I don't respond. She took advantage of my weaknesses and ailments for her own personal gain in hindsight, and I let her. I'm not an innocent party. At this point, I'm not sure if it was ever love, maybe in the beginning, but who knows. Story 11. I didn't receive physical abuse, but instead mental and emotional abuse. My first ex cheated on me, and I gave her multiple second chances. First mistake. After the first time she did, we were supposed to be working on the relationship. Well, she purposely sent texts to me to make me jealous afterward because she liked how much I fought for our relationship. When I brought up stuff that made me uncomfortable, she instantly turned on me and told me to man up. This led to me wanting to break things off, and she threatened to kill herself then. No matter what I did, it was always on me. She cut off my friends and made my family relationship strained, so I felt trapped. My self-esteem went down, I barely valued myself, and I have trust issues from it. I was constantly paranoid because she played with my trust. There were communication issues because I was always shut down whenever I tried to fix something. She had me on a leash, and I still feel ashamed I let someone treat me like that. It ended when she cheated on me when I was in basic training for the army. I came back from training and eventually learned about everything. At that point, I just blew up all my pent-up emotions from the mental and emotional abuse and mind games. I told her everything that was on my mind. She got mad at me for raising my voice at her. Again, she tried to turn everything against me when she was the unfaithful one for so long. It took a year to finally recover enough to get back into a relationship, and that leads to my second ex. My second ex actually started doing the same thing, trying to make me insecure and jealous. Trying to show that I care by making me do more work in the relationship to prove to her that I loved her. It was such stupid mind games, but I knew the patterns from my first relationship, and I broke up with her when more red flags appeared. I learned from my first relationship and what to avoid at all costs. I am still facing trust issues and communication, but how I see her now and how I have ended up, I am proud of how much I've grown from the experience, and I know my worth. Never again will I be with someone who will abuse me mentally or try to play games with me. There are many forms of abuse, and I hope my story helped. Story 12. When an incident occurred during a vacation, she didn't take responsibility for any of it. Then, she managed to make herself into the victim and wrote me a long email about what an awful person I was. It totally blew my mind how someone could completely change a story that much in their own heads to become the victim. We only talked in person one more time after that, and I could see up close and personal how she not only tried to deceive me but managed to convince herself it was all true. It was truly scary. Story 13. Honestly, my ex was emotionally abusive from the start. I just didn't feel like I was worth any better, and then I fell into a deep state of denial. I have suffered from anxiety, depression, and imposter syndrome since I was a kid, and it was particularly bad in my late teenage years. At 18, I hadn't had a date for 2 years and felt like I was going to die alone. I signed up for a dating site and didn't get any messages for about 6 months, which didn't help that feeling. Eventually, a girl did send me a message, but I ignored it because her profile said she was vegan, and I figured she must have just missed the part where I wrote about my favorite foods because vegans just don't date non-vegans. Surprisingly, she sent me a second message about a month later. Again, I received no other messages, so I figured that was my sign that this was the only option I was going to get. We talked online for a month or two, and I really don't know why I tried so hard. Thinking back on it, I kind of dreaded talking to her because she had such a negative perspective on men, which I am, and was kind of depressing even to me. Eventually, we did go on a date, which she was 45 minutes late to. Turns out, she is always late to everything, but otherwise went fairly well. I clung to that and threw my entire being into making her want to be in a relationship with me. The entire time, she would use guilt to get me to do what she wanted, but I was in denial about her being controlling. She made me feel bad about everything I enjoyed, barely tolerating my hobbies and effectively isolating me from my friends. She eventually even guilted me about having friends because she didn't have any, and I shouldn't have friends unless they were friends with both of us. The only acceptable thing for me to be doing at any given point was being with her and doing whatever she wanted to do. Even if she didn't want to do anything but sit on the couch with her phone and ignore me, I needed to be right next to her while she did it. I guess I chalked it up to being successful in my attempts at making her happy. We never fought until the last year of the relationship because I would always just concede to her wishes. Everything had to be the way she wanted it, not the way I wanted it. Everything from movies to date nights to vacations, which we never really took because planning them gave her so much anxiety, to the house I ended up buying. Every now and then, I would find some time to watch a movie or TV show without her, but most of the time, if I did that, she would make me feel bad about it. Sometimes I would try and push a little for doing something I wanted to do, but she would end up having a panic attack over it, or would make us so late that going was pointless, or would make us leave super early. My denial was such that I actually specifically avoided getting therapy for my mental health issues because I was afraid the therapist would point out that my relationship was part of the problem. I thought that if a therapist told me that, it would mean I would lose my only chance at a relationship because no one else would want me. This went on for years. I even married this woman because I figured that's what I was supposed to do by that point, even though I couldn't really imagine the two of us growing old together. Thinking back on it, I really only ever dreamed or imagined the future elderly me as being alone, even when I was in that relationship. Eventually, I got a new job where I got along great with my coworkers and began to make friends and learn more about their lives. My boss had a great relationship with his wife. Both were nerds in their own ways, and they had things they shared and things they enjoyed separately, and they were both happy and supportive of each other. One of my coworkers, on the other hand, had a terrible relationship and had been in it twice as long as I had been in mine, and I realized that everything he said resonated with me. The more I got to know him, the more I realized that his relationship was identical to mine, but had twice as long to fester and become even more problematic and hateful. I wanted a relationship like the one my boss had, not one like my coworker had. I finally asked for us to go to couples therapy, and she flipped out, saying that it was just an attack on her, and she had a panic attack. She had lots of those anytime we were about to do something I wanted to do. When the day arrived, so I ended up folding under pressure and we didn't go. Honestly, that was the day I gave up. If she couldn't even support me in trying to fix our relationship, which she was the prime beneficiary of, then how could she ever support me in anything at all? It was after that when I started to notice that some girls around the office looked at me longer than I would have expected, and I started hearing gossip about them thinking I was attractive, which is something I had never experienced before. It felt nice and started to boost my confidence, which my ex hated. It took the better part of a year, but I finally built up the courage to tell her I wanted a divorce. She guilted me into trying couples therapy. Of course, she could handle it when it was her idea, but my heart wasn't in it by that point. She pulled out all of the cards we got from our wedding and tried to use those to guilt me into staying. After a couple of tense days, I couldn't handle the stress anymore and took a day off work without telling her to pack up as much of my stuff as I could into my car, and lived in a hotel for a couple of days before moving in with some coworkers. The divorce took over a year to go through and was finalized this past February, and should be truly done this coming February when I get the house out of my name. I've since started dating a former coworker I had become friends with playing Pokemon Go around the office, and it's so much better. My experience has left me a bit messed up as far as my behavior in a relationship, I'm discovering, but my girlfriend and I are working through it together. I don't think I'll ever not have anxiety thinking about the 10 years I poured into a relationship that I should never have stuck with, though.